Cool.
We are back, huh?
One more show. And
Show number 2.
hi, I'm Paco, by the way.
I'm Brian.
Don't know if you know my name, but yeah.
Welcome to The Right Show.
Number two. Show number two.
Yeah, show number 2. It's The Right Show. Somehow we managed to survive the first week.
Yes, we didn't die. No car accidents. No death
Yeah.
threats. No nothing. So we're good. Yeah. So 2 big things that we're going to talk about today, right? Helen
Uh-huh.
and the debate. The other debate.
Well, the VP debate is tonight. We'll kind of talk about that.
The debate that matters and doesn't matter at the same time. What do you think?
I don't know. I honestly am not sure if it matters much at all. But it'll be interesting.
We'll get to know our candidates a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we'll get to see what they, as a couple of, some drama that they had to take care of.
Yeah.
Hopefully they get to answer some of those important questions. But yeah, why don't we start off with this natural disaster, right?
Right.
It is affecting our country, so I think it's relevant to talk about.
Yeah.
There's obviously millions of people that have been affected, so it's relevant to talk about.
And of course our prayers are with the victims here because there's a lot of damage done.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
and I certainly, like we talked about it a little bit before, but I've gone through more like natural disasters, I guess, than you have living in Mexico. But anyways, what city or what states were affected? It's Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. National Guard's already there, FEMA's already there, and Red Cross is obviously helping, on all those search and rescue missions that they're going to be managing. Over 100 people dead. Trump was already there in September, and then
that's
Biden's
Georgia, right? I think that's
Georgia.
where he was.
Yeah, he was in Georgia, and then Biden tomorrow will be there, October 3rd. Pretty disaster situation. I've seen a ton of videos online of just these huge mudslides, streets, like hundreds of homes just completely destroyed. Water excessively high. Like there was a couple of 2-story buildings videos that I saw of, and dude, there was watermarks all the way to the top, the middle side of the stairs, and it was just crazy. To see that kind of stuff in America surprises me, because then again it reminds me of when I lived in Mexico. People would die, people were trapped in places that was going to be really difficult to get to. Obviously you would need a helicopter or some sort of
it's like over 100 people have died or something, or at least are not found or something like that.
I'm sure those numbers are still going to go up, unfortunately, but just really sad situation to see. Hopefully we get more attention to it, more
people are stuck. Apparently 300 roads are shut down and people can't get in and out.
Just
water is scarce.
Water, power,
or clean water, drinking water, I mean, is scarce.
And it's just just a really big shame. But this is something that happens every year, right? I think it's that tornadoes in the Midwest, and blizzards up north, northeast. And man, I just wish that more people brace themselves for these kinds of situations.
But I mean, my understanding, this is kind of a one-off for North Carolina, because I guess they've never had this before or something like to this extent. So it's almost a shock to everybody. Yeah.
And it's, I mean, again, totally a shame, but if I'm living there, and we've had talks about whether or not we might move, but if I'm living there, I'm definitely preparing for any kind of natural disaster that might come up, whether it's tornadoes or hurricanes.
But I mean, if it's never happened before, how could you even know what to prepare for sometimes?
That's 100% true, North Carolina.
But I do really believe that it's important that we kind of protect ourselves by having, let's say, some amounts of clean water bottles or things of that nature. So I guess even here I considered that before, which to be fair, being a little hypocritical here, that I've thought about what happens in an earthquake, but I've never done anything about it.
Right.
But I do think that I should get some water, some foods that are
supplies,
non-perishable supplies, in case of
all important stuff that every home should have, right?
Which
WD-40,
again, I haven't yet done it, but I guess I probably should look into that. Duct tape, maybe. Who knows? I think there's a lot that we need to consider. Hunting gear or things like that.
100%.
But I guess I've never even put way too much thought into it. I don't even know if where to meet my family members in case something like that happens. I've never really settled in on putting a lot of thought into it, other than kind of jokingly with my friends. But I guess with Helene, it kind of is worth thinking about, because even today in the morning I texted my buddy and business partner who lives with his
North
family
Carolina,
in,
right?
well, Virginia,
Virginia, sorry. Okay.
Farmville area. And I just basically checked in. Hey, are you guys doing okay? Did it affect you? Because it didn't cross my mind that it could possibly affect them, because it was something talked about, I thought, in Florida actually.
Yeah.
But then now that it's like, oh wait, it's in
It's
all these
east,
multi
yeah, north,
states, and
northern, eastern,
kind of
yeah.
just surprised me. As we were thinking about it, I was like, wait, I gotta check in on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But well, yeah.
So
Hopefully he wasn't affected. But yeah,
yeah,
terrible
hopefully.
situation.
Yeah.
And what we hope to see, see what else happens in the next
Yeah. Yeah.
couple of days. But yeah, it was that, and then our VP debate later today. Excited, see what's going to happen. There's a couple of issues that both of them obviously I think need to talk about. I think one of them has definitely been the accusations from Vance towards Waltz about his
Right.
whether or not he's stealing valor and whether or not he's dishonoring somebody or a group of people. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting, and I hope that they talk about that issue. So yeah, I mean, what do you know about Waltz and Vance?
Well, before that, I think we should kind of generally iron out what is the role of the vice
Oh right,
president, right?
yeah,
Because these are
yeah,
the two hopefuls for their respective party. Um, but I think a lot of people think of the role of the vice president as almost like a joke. And it
it
does feel a little bit like that. But I guess from the constitutional
POV
angle,
POV.
okay, the role of the vice president is to serve as the president of the Senate.
Okay,
But really, at the same time, they only serve truly in that role when there's a tie in the Senate and they're the tiebreaker.
right.
So it almost feels very limited.
Yeah, 100% limited. Yeah,
Right. Of course, they're the ones that do count the electoral votes when the next election comes around, things like that. But traditionally, my understanding is that the vice president and the president did not actually often interact with each other too much,
okay.
which is kind of funny. Um, and of course, uh, historically speaking, that could make sense because they might not even be in the same area at the same time or things of that nature. And back in the day, they didn't have phones or whatnot, right? So
Yeah,
you'd have to send a horse out
or
to,
some bird or
yeah,
something.
yeah, you would
Not a bird.
have,
They didn't use birds, but yeah.
yeah. And so that's why, but more in the modern sense now, the job of the VP seems to be to push the agenda or help enact the policies of the White House. So that makes some sense.
Like a second voice backing
Maybe, yeah,
the
maybe offer
original
some
one.
advice to the president. And of course, the hope is that the vice president also can help the president get elected or get reelected on the second term, things like that.
Right.
And obviously the most obvious one is that if the president somehow cannot perform his duty or has passed away or something of that nature, then the vice president has to be ready to step up and be the president.
Yeah. Just a fun fact about that: 48 previous vice presidents out of the 48, 9 have succeeded to the presidency,
Mm.
and 5 of those have been elected to the presidency in their own right. So, and that's according to the White House,
Only
White
five
House,
of them though?
WhiteHouse.gov. Yeah,
Huh.
which is, look,
Okay.
the numbers aren't so significant, but it does happen where a president is killed, and then we do need that vice president to step in, or the vice president is so popular and people will like him so much and make such an impression on the American public that he's voted as president in the next election. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's something that we have to keep in mind when we're voting. There have been accusations from JD Vance towards Tim Walz.
Right.
Both of them are veterans. Both of them served, one in the
Mm-hmm.
National Guard, one in the Navy, and they are the 160. Waltz is 60, and I think you said Vance is 40 years old.
Yeah, I told you that the age difference is there, age 40 versus age 60. They kind of seem to be wildly on opposite sides
Yeah,
on a lot of things, which I guess makes sense with the polarization of today's politics.
it's all just black and white.
Right, right. Even though, I mean, they both served and they both had the NRA's endorsement at some point. At this point, though, the NRA removed its endorsement of Waltz and actually went from giving Waltz an A ranking for gun rights to an F ranking.
Yeah,
So that's a start shift. At the same time, maybe we can kind of talk a little bit about their backgrounds as to what we kind of generally know.
Yeah, well, after doing just a little research online, right, we find out that Vance, writer,
Right.
veteran,
Yeah, Marine veteran, Yale grad, Ohio senator now,
right, 2022.
and he kind of came to his position of fame through the book that he wrote, Hillbilly Elegy, which was a #1 New York Times bestseller. Um,
Turned movie
right, turned
on
into a movie.
Netflix.
I don't know about Netflix, but whatever it was on, I mean, he kind of became famous through that. And his book is a little bit of a memoir about himself growing up in Appalachia, and that region is kind of a coal mine region, working class kind of America that
Yeah.
has, for the most part, seemingly have been forgotten or maybe even looked down on. And despite the fact of all of those things, he was still able to go to Yale. I guess the whole entire book is maybe talking a little bit about societal structures and things like that.
Stereotypes and
Right, right,
what the perspective is from this rural
right,
America, right?
right. And I mean, and all to the credit of Amy Adams, she was a spectacular actress. She's always been a great actress, but I think in that movie, she kind of showcased a side of her that I never got a chance to see before. That was pretty cool.
Mhm.
And it's funny enough because I also watched this movie before things got really heavily politicized.
How long ago did you watch it? Do you
I don't
know?
remember. I mean, whenever
Was it
it
like
came out,
5 years?
right? I don't
Whenever
know
it
when
came
it
out?
came
Okay,
out.
okay, okay.
Yeah, so it didn't actually come across to me in any way as a political campaign of any form when I watched the movie. I didn't read the book, but when I watched the movie, it just seemed like a movie about hardworking people and their
American film.
struggles,
An American
right?
film.
And specifically about, in this case, it was JD Vance's mother, her struggles as well, and you kind of got a chance to see that in how she portrayed the mother of JD Vance. So this was actually a very interesting watch, and I would not have looked at that movie and said, "Oh, there's some politics behind it." So I thought it was kind of weird that once JD Vance became a politician, it just seemed like there was such a swing or something here where people tried to make the movie something that it really wasn't.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
or the book itself, and articles came out saying things like, "Should you read Hillbilly Elegy? Uh, no," or something like that. And I was like, "Well, that sounds a little harsh."
A little antagonizing.
Yeah, and I'm like, but it was on the New York Times bestseller, which
So many books seem
yeah.
to be, by the way, right? Like it
Hmm.
almost seems like every book that we ever,
But I
hear
mean, to be
about.
honest, I don't even know what that means to be a New York Times bestseller, because because at least according to what I saw, it says #1 New York Times bestseller. So in my mind, I always think #1 literally means the #1 most sold book.
Hmm.
But I don't think so, because how could there be so many books that are number
Number
one?
one. Yeah, it's a
And
little bit
right,
confusing.
so then I went and did a deep dive on how all of this works. But apparently, it's #1, let's say, in a specific category,
Okay.
right? And the category is not necessarily even, let's say, nonfiction or fiction, which would make two categories, but really it's subcategories of subcategories,
Hmm.
right? So let's say #1 in finance, but not really #1 in finance. It could be #1 in stocks, which is listed under finance, or #1 in how to do options trading, or a very specific set of types of option trading. And then, so if you narrow down to a very, very tiny subcategory, you could make your book #1 ranking, despite the fact that it's maybe only sold, I don't know, 2,000 copies.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what
Yeah.
exactly that means. But it got big enough where, Amy Adams was acting
Look, it
in
was
it.
turned
I
into a movie.
Right,
If the book is turned into a movie, then that was because there was a lot of success on the
right,
book.
right,
And if the movie turns out to be
right.
so successful,
And
then
it's a mainstream movie is the key thing here, right? It's not like, oh, Left Behind, and then all these Christians went and watched this Left Behind movie, even though it honestly was probably pretty terrible.
uh-huh.
And but a lot of people watch it just because they're Christians, right, or something like that, right? But I'm talking about a mainstream film. I thought that was interesting that a mainstream film picked this up. And so, anyways, but that's, that's a little bit about the background of this hardworking class in Ohio, that's forgotten, and JD Vance kind of writes about that. um, as for Tim Walz, he was a social studies teacher, and he also was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2006. So he's been in government for a bit of time
Yeah,
now.
so
That's almost 20
longer
years.
than Vance.
Right, a lot longer, obviously. And he's the governor of Minnesota. And here's where we start to see some differences between their policies, whether it's like DEI, or affirmative action, things like
Yeah, I
that.
definitely
There's a lot
wanna.
of
I
difference.
definitely
Yeah.
want questions from the moderator to be about the LGBT
Right.
or their LGBT policies and see how they're gonna
Right.
approach these issues. I
Yeah.
would obviously love to see them, finally like sort out their positions on like if Tim Walz's time as a member of the National Guard was relevant to any major wars. I mean, that'd be interesting to
Yeah.
see. And also, I think just like before, and one of the stronger points from the left is reminding Republicans, hey, or people of the right, hey, like Trump was convicted in New York, so yeah, they're hopefully I get to see Tim Walz attack Vance on that, and then just remind people, hey, like you're following a criminal here, and then let's see how JD Vance has to respond.
I fully expect that to happen,
Right,
right? Whether you fall on the side of Trump is guilty or not, or he was unfairly trialed in these situations, I think we all have our own opinion about that.
right,
But it would be good to see JD Vance defend Trump, right? Because
right.
again, the modern VP has to be able to defend the president,
Yeah,
right?
you're running with
Right.
him. You might
Right.
as
So it
well.
would be good to kind of see, hey, what is his defense of these things? Is he going to cite the fact that it was done, let's say in New York, where it's like overwhelmingly one-sided or things like that? Like there's some there's some give and take here. I would like to see how JD Vance defends that. And also what you mentioned earlier, how does when pressed, hopefully he'll be pressed about this. How does Tim Walz defend the fact that he never served in either Iraq or Afghanistan? And if he didn't serve in those war efforts, like as in being deployed there, what does his statements mean when he's talking about gun control, and he's saying these are weapons of war that, to quote, I carried to war? Um, what does that even mean? Because he never carried any weapons to
Right,
war.
National Guard, right? They're protecting
Right.
the nation.
Right.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting debate,
Yeah.
especially trying to answer
I
that
just want to
question.
see how they
Yeah,
parse this out.
and they're valid questions, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
we should be like very critical of the people that we want in
yeah.
charge.
Especially if you're saying something that you never did and you're saying it like you did it. It kind of reminds me of that time when Kobe Bryant scored 81 points, right?
Right,
And imagine if Brian Cook, who scored one bucket that night, he had 2 points that night, and then he says, "Oh yeah, that night Kobe and I, we was hot. We scored 83 points together that night." And it's like, well, I mean, yes, you did serve, but you also didn't go into Iraq or Afghanistan. But then you act like you did, and then now you're almost playing it off like you did. It's like,
right.
okay, you scored 2 points on that night. Yeah, you're technically correct that you scored 83 together with Kobe, but at the same time, that's taking a lot of credit from people who actually really did serve there, and
Yeah,
potentially got their limbs blown off or lost their
yeah,
lives, and also to the parents of those people.
yeah.
It just feels like a real
And
issue
we
to
want
be
to pay
talked
our
about.
respect to both. We want to pay our
Yeah,
respect to both. Look, giving your life for the country for 24 years, as Tim Walz has said, like that's respectable, right?
yeah,
Like you
yeah.
are
I give
dedicated.
them that
There's
credit.
an amount of discipline that goes into that
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of people just don't have these days.
yeah,
So
yeah.
look, praises to you, right?
But here's the
Kudos to
thing:
you,
is we shouldn't give credit for something not done. Is what I'm trying to
right?
say.
And then hopefully,
Yeah.
he'll have this stage
Right,
to
right.
clear that out, and
I want him to
that's
say something
important.
about it. He
Yeah,
should, as he
yeah.
should. Just like JD Vance also has to respond to why he at some point was very never Trumper. And
We know that he called him, America's Hitler at one
or
point, and then
I think the term or the phrase that he mentioned was he's probably America's Hitler, something like that.
right, And then obviously
Right.
all sorts of news networks took this, as a well title card as a title card as
Yeah.
the the headliner for whatever news
Right.
there
And
was.
rightfully so. Rightfully so. I mean, if you say something like that, you're probably going to get called out on it.
Yeah, and he'll speak
And
about that, and
I mean,
we'll see
he
what he has
has
to say.
mentioned on Megyn Kelly's show that he regrets those statements because he realized after Trump was in office for those 4 years that he enacted great policies that he fully agreed with, and that he now fully supports Trump. So that actually brings about to me, in my opinion, a very interesting point is that they always say, we got to unify and this and that. I think the person that has, funny enough, shown to be the most unifying in this specific not debate, but in this specific uh,
Situation.
election cycle,
Yeah, yeah.
it seems to me the most unifying candidate actually is Trump, because he was able to get JD Vance, who called him probably America's Hitler,
Hmm.
right? Uh,
Implied it.
or implied it at least, right? Legend, I don't know. And then also he was able to get Tulsi Gabbard, who was a Democratic presidential nominee,
Yeah.
and then got RFK, who is an actual Kennedy from the famed Kennedy Democratic uh,
Yeah, from the Kennedy family.
line. Yeah, I mean, he was able to get these three people to side with him, and Elon Musk, who is also a lifelong Democrat, right? And just multiple people from the opposite sides to come together to have a unity party, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
I think, if anything, that is
And you mentioned something
says
similar to
something.
this earlier, where you know people on the left and on the right don't. There's a lot of people that don't like Trump. He's just overall disliked. You can say whatever you have to say about him,
I
but
mean, that's the point, right? Is to be able to hear from JD Vance about why he came around,
yeah,
and
that'd
to
be
be able to hear from Tim Walz what
valid
he
question. Yeah, completely
what
valid
he
question.
disagrees with on this and that. I do want to kind of talk a little bit though about some of JD Vance's policies, as well as some of Tim Walz's policies that they have
Yeah, what do you
shown
know?
support for. Well, with JD Vance, I think we can see some stark differences here. He is anti DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think those words are always very loaded, and it always is designed to give you this feeling of, like, for example, if you're not for DEI, then you're anti-diversity,
Hmm.
or you don't like to be
And
inclusive
he's gonna
or
have
things
to
like that.
explain
Right, he
that,
has to explain
and
those
we're
things,
expecting
what
him
that
to.
means,
But
right? But that's why I don't really take seriously these little three word organizations or things, or policies, because I want to look at what's inside of them, right? Like, what does diversity mean in this context, in education, or affirmative action? Affirmative action sounds like a good thing, because affirmative, I guess, always sounds good.
yeah, it has
But
positive
what does that
connotation,
mean,
right?
right? The Patriot Act in the past, right? It's like, oh, if you don't support the Patriot Act, that means you're not patriotic,
Right.
right? And I'm like, is that really what that means? Or maybe you just really hate some of the things inside the Patriot Act, right? Um, so those are the things that I want to hear from JD Vance. What is he anti DEI about? What is he anti affirmative action about? And also, um, what is his thoughts, whether it's on child rearing and all of that? Because um,
Oh yeah,
he does support
another hot
the
point, right? Abortion for both of them.
right abortion, and also he wants to support free childbirth, and financially incentivizing types of policies that would help people raise children for either cheaper, or have some child tax credit or things like that. Which, again, he also has to show what he's supporting here, because there will be a group of libertarians that say, no, like, we
We don't
shouldn't
like this guy.
incentivize
Yeah,
or disincentivize. I mean, the government should focus on, like, building streets or something, you know.
yeah.
But again, you're going to have to deal with all these things. I'm kind of curious about it, what his thoughts are. And also, another thing is, when he supports exceptions to abortion bans, What are those exceptions? I kind of believe that we already know. It's probably talking about heartbeat bill, and things like, for example, in the case of grapes,
Hmm. Right.
um, or and sorry, I don't mean to laugh about that. I wasn't laughing about that really. It was more like I'm trying to
Right.
not say, censored words, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, these are all really important issues that probably require him to flesh it out for us, right? And he might lose some people actually on that front, because pro-life groups can sometimes be pretty one way about it. So they might say, I'm pro-life no matter what the scenario is, and
Right.
if, let's say, the presidential candidate or the VP is for some form of exception here, then it's hard for some pro-life people to even vote for that. So it's tough. He's
Yeah.
gonna have to flesh out what
They're
his
not going to
idea
follow,
is.
obviously, the questions. Well, we think that they don't know what the questions are,
Right,
and they're not following a teleprompter or anything. They do have to come up with answers on the spot, like in any debate,
right,
and we'll get to see what are their speaking skills, like
yeah.
who can
And
who
but
can who can be in the kitchen for longer,
but they already have policies that they have supported, so we do know some of what they support,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So for example, we know that Tim Walz does support DEI. He does support certain educational programs that are highly controversial. um, at this point, it's pretty much kind of the, maybe even going to, my guess is that JD Vance is going to make that the focal point of his
Yeah, yeah. It'll,
debate.
it'll also be
Right.
really interesting to see what new policies or what new agendas they want to bring to the table.
Right.
Because I'm sure that Trump isn't always the one leading the meetings on
Right.
what they're gonna change specifically.
Right.
Like vice presidents
Right.
advise presidents. So yeah, let's see if they can come up with some creative policies
I think
for
that
the
they
voters.
they have
Voters.
to defend what they've supported in the past and what they will support in the future. And I can't imagine that JD Vance or Tim Walz is going to not press these issues on each other, because Tim Walz, he supported certain educational programs, such as if a child wants to have pharmacological or surgical operations done to their bodies, they don't have to notify their parents, and the school doesn't have to notify the parents if the teachers find out, and things like that. uh, I think you're gonna get some pushback on that from plenty of parents in America. I think that, at least for my own stance, I generally don't want my government getting involved too deeply in any type of real serious physical change to my kids.
Right.
And especially, we're talking about something as serious as a permanent change that could happen,
Yeah,
right?
you do want to. I mean, you want the family to do the
Yes,
family things and
right.
talk about
If
whatever
anything,
it is that they may talk about.
shouldn't we be encouraging families to have this conversation of their own, instead of saying let's hide it from the parents? We should probably say, like, hey parents, this is what's going on with your children, and it would be a good idea for you to have these in-depth discussions over and over, if it takes that, and really get to know your child, what he's going through or she's going through, and maybe give it some time before you make these drastic life altering decisions, um, before you're even allowed to rent a car, or send in your first vote,
Yeah.
or smoke a cigarette, or drink
Yeah.
alcohol. I mean,
The
we're talking about
focus.
somebody who's, let's say, potentially 16 or 15, making a life altering decision that I think is
Yeah.
very
And the
dangerous.
families, right?
Yeah.
Its own, the people who are blood related, who stereotypically tend to be the more loving ones already.
Right.
Like we should probably let them decide.
Yeah,
You know,
let them
let it be
walk this journey with this
yeah,
kid.
and be
Yeah.
a part of it, and ask
Yeah.
questions, and just be present. Anyways, we have to wrap up for today. Thank you so much for listening. And is there anything you want to add this last
I
minute?
think at the end of the day, I just want to see both of them be able to push each other pretty hard, and give each other the right to answer without a whole bunch of the CBS moderators getting in the
getting
way, which
involved.
that drives me crazy when the moderators constantly stop to say this or that and essentially tag team. I'm like, I just want you to let them work it out between them two.
Yeah, they have to sort it out. I mean, they're the
And
ones
right,
in the debate.
right. And my issue, and I'll try to close on this, but my issue is we can't have a panel of moderators that clearly looks like they're on one side. That's a big problem because then it just doesn't feel like a fair fight. I think that if, let's say, JD Vance has something to say, you got to let him say it. And Tim Walt has to be the one that fact checks him and vice versa. It can't be the moderators popping in every so often and saying, "Oh, well, actually the stat is this or actually this that." And I'm like, let them fight it out, right? Let them feel this out. Let them have a chance to truly engage. And the way that you and I, we play basketball a lot together. Don't you think that the worst part is when the referees get involved? I
Right.
want the referees to
To be the
do their
least
job.
involved as
Right. The
possible.
best way to be a referee is that at the end of the game, nobody questions if the referees were the reason why somebody won.
Yeah.
That is the objective dream of the referee, is that you are only there to serve the purpose of being fair. And that's it.
That's it. And that's what a moderator should do.
Right. That's what you should aspire to be, at least.
Yeah, and we'll
Yeah.
we'll see them later today. Get in
Yeah.
there and hopefully answer the questions that we want to
We'll
to
come
be
back to you
answered.
next week and kind of give you our take on it.
So please stick
Yeah.
around, subscribe, like, comment, share this video with somebody that you know, and yeah, thank you so much for watching.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Okay.
So, Paco, do you love me? Just kidding.